With that depressing thing, I'll try and go on my, what I've called my whistle-tops tour of green issues and retrofit, etc., etc. And just to say welcome back, everyone, and I hope everybody's keeping well and warm this early winter. There were several reasons, I think, why the exec decided to have this team for our current forum. COP26 brought home to many people, what many people have known for decades, to the general public about the issue of climate change. I mean, I used to joke when sometimes when I was amongst people discussing this, that I was looking forward to retiring to Clerkenwell Beach, where I would sit under the mango trees and watch seabirds circle the outlying islands that used to be city offices. But I mean, I'm afraid that was a joke, but I'm afraid that could become a reality very, very quickly at this stage. The other reasons we had this is there's a revolution underway in the energy sector, and the housing co-ops should be in a position to take advantage of this, and we just want to publicize that. Wind turbine capacity, in the long run, wind turbine capacity is expected to increase by about 30 gigawatts. A gigawatt, for those people who don't know, is about 1 million kilowatts, which is a measure of energy. And when I mean gigawatts, I mean gigawatt hours, which is the amount of energy that's generated by a device in an hour. So these are huge, huge increases in the amount of energy available to this country. At the moment I checked, and I think in the next 2 to 3 years, next 2 years, when I added them up, 10 gigawatts of this power will be coming online. It's already in the pipeline and is in the process of being built around the place. This has significant implications. The peak electricity consumption in this country is roughly about 42 to 45 gigawatts. So you can see that we're doubling the capacity of the electric grid in the space of a few years. And off-peak hours, it's between 20 and 25 gigawatts. I should say peak hours generally is something between 4 o'clock in the afternoon and 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And outside that, electricity consumption tends to be a lot less. So you're going to have an awful lot of energy floating around there, and it will suppress prices. Of course, the energy companies, I suspect, will be reluctant to pass these prices on to us, but it's something we keep in mind. These wind turbines are, along with solar, they are the cheapest form of power now. And as I'm saying, there'll be a glut of this energy available off peak. In addition to that, solar panels are getting cheaper. This is residential solar panels, and falling in cost all the time. And they're expected to fall by 80% or 85% in the next few years. Battery costs are always falling nearly as fast, and this will be quite significant. In the short term, we've seen these fossil fuel prices are rising due to gas shortages, and I think Putin and the Saudis have seen the writing on the wall, so they're restricting production at the moment, because this will be, I suspect, the next few years will be their last chance to make money out of this. So we can expect to see these prices go up. They will fall eventually because of the demand will collapse. But that was a while away yet. But what is happening here is it's making fuel poverty rise. And our members on low income, own incomes are really suffering from this. They can't heat their homes, they can't keep warm, and their energy bills are going through the roof. So how can we as co-ops take advantage of this to help our members? There are grants available now, and how can we decarbonize our stock? As I said before, we've a few wonderful speakers today. Charlie Baker from Red Co-op is pioneering some wonderful work in retrofitting and in virtual power stations. And Alex Hartley and Nadia Smith are energy champions, and they train energy champions. It'll be quite interesting to hear what they say. I've heard a presentation from Alex, and she was brilliant. And the other factors that we have to keep in mind, and this is the Mayor of London wants London to be carbon free by 2030. 33%, or sorry, 23% of London's carbon emissions comes from property. So they will want that reduced fairly substantially. Nearly all London councils have declared a climate emergency, and they plan to be net zero carbon emitters by 2030 as well. And again, we need to cut this energy, we need to cut the energy that we use in the homes to do this. But before I go into the meat of what I have to say, I'll just sort of define a few other terms people might have heard. If you've heard the term SAP being used about buildings, it stands for Standard Assessment Procedure, and it rates your property energy efficiency from 1 to 100. 100 being that your property is sealed tight, and that energy you produce there is put into that. This is, I think, impossible, but London SAP energies are generally a lot lower than that. And another term used is EPCs, which stands for Energy Performance Certificates. These rate your property according to alphabet A to G. I just mentioned that anything under the A is 90% efficient. And I think anything with C is something like 68% efficient. And all the rest are graded downwards. We'll put links into this. I will post links into this if people want to know more about it onto the website and on the Facebook page after the meeting. Right, 85% of our energy use comes from gas, and that's the main carbon dioxide emitter in properties. So we have to do something to reduce our energy consumption. Now, the best way of reducing our energy consumption, the one with the biggest hit, is to look about retrofitting our properties so that we use an awful lot less heat in the winter. But I'll let other people talk about that in more detail. Fabric first, I think, is the term they use. And it basically means that we plug up drafts in our Victorian properties, insulate walls, install double or triple glazing windows, insulate our roofs and doors, etc. And also, don't forget that we need to insulate our ground floor sometimes as well, because there is a lot of heat lost through the ground source. And I'll just mention solar panels as well. Solar panels are cheap and getting cheaper. They cost about $1,500 per kilowatt to install them when I last looked. But I did a paper a few years ago, which again I'll circulate, that you can save money if you want to install them as part of your cyclical maintenance, because a significant part of the cost of installing solar panels is actually scaffolding and getting onto the roofs and to put them on. If you reduce that, you can probably get these the panels down to roughly about maybe 12 to sometimes maybe £1,000 per kilowatt, which makes them, quite viable. And of course, you can always factor in some grants with this. I'm going to go through now a number of different devices that we can use to and are using to cut back our supply. So it's a little bit of a, I would say, a train of consciousness here. So bear with me while I go through this. One thing that's been fashionable lately has been heat pumps. You hear them in the press and how they're going to be the great saver, etc., etc. I would take heat pumps with a pinch of salt. They have a place, but they are not the panacea, as some people seem to think they are. There are two main types of heat pumps. There are air-sourced heat pumps and there are ground-sourced heat pumps. You would generally, ground-sourced heat pumps are more appropriate for communal energy systems, where you can put loads of pipes in the ground and use the heat from the pipes to, which effectively to generate heating in the homes. Air source are probably more appropriate for individual properties, and you use those to extract heat from the air and use it to heat your homes inside, from the outside air, and use it to heat your homes inside. Basically, heat pumps are reversible fridge engines in reverse. Their main drawback, I think, is they're expensive to install, and they also require a certain amount of effort to use them properly, both in terms of the installer needs to know what they're doing when they're installing, and there are some cowboys out there, and the individual who has it installed needs a little bit training of how to get the best out of them when they are installed. They are, of course, the most efficient form of heating. They supply, for each unit of heat that goes into them, or electricity that goes into them effectively, they are 600% efficient in the best cases, although in the UK we'll probably be looking to get between 200 or 300 efficiency. Other alternatives to heating are electric stories like Dimplex. These work by, if you have Energy 7 or one of those schemes where you can buy cheap, you buy cheap electricity off grid. I think I remember OVO and Octopus offering cheap electricity at something like 4.2p per kilowatt, which is roughly about where gas prices are now. So these are becoming a little bit more viable. You charge them up off-peak times, you know, at between midnight and 4 o'clock in the morning, and you use them then in the evening when you're back from work or wherever to keep yourself warm. They're probably, you know, they're not a full solution, but there is something that you could use occasionally to keep in the mix. The other thing I should have mentioned about heat pumps is that the temperatures you can get for them is roughly about 60, 70 degrees. So there has to be some way of boosting them in cold weather so that they actually heat your properties up to about 70 or 80 degrees, which some people need. I'm using degrees Fahrenheit rather than centigrade because I assume some people are still using the old measures. Other heating systems are underfloor heating. Again, this is a great, if you can do it, this is great. It's quite efficient. You heat the small pipe, you lay down a flooring. The series of small pipes are attached to a heater. They're warmed up and effectively the heat is generated where you need it most at the lower level. Heat rises. So the lower you generate the heat, the most benefit you get out of it. In fact, the majority of the heat that you generate in your own house, it's stuck up in the ceiling rather than down below heating you. But with underfloor heating, it is more efficient that way in that it heats at the level people are at rather than people's ceilings. Other devices are smart radiator valves, which again, you can use this to switch on and off radiators in your house automatically, or you can do it remotely. Some of them allow you to have little apps you can do, install in your mobile phones, and can switch on the valves and the heating before you come in for work, or if you go out for the day, you can switch off the heating as well. When discussing heating, I'll just mention that I think it's 24, 25, you won't be able to install new gas combi boilers in your properties. You'll have to do something else. And they are electric combi boilers are coming on stream. These again, there's not a lot of experience at the moment installing them, but they're going to become very, very common. Their main advantage, it could be generating your heat through electricity could be expensive, although I think the differential in the next 3 years will disappear, which I mentioned before. And electric combi boilers require less maintenance than gas combi boilers, which means that you can save on maintenance costs. You only have to do a pack test on your electrical devices once every 5 years, I think, for domestic properties that you manage, compared to having to do the regular CP12 test on gas-powered boilers and heaters every year, which should save a small amount of money. Plus, the fact is that gas heaters, gas boilers, towards the end of their life, they can cost an awful lot to be repaired. And they're also, I think, necessary to service them every year. which again adds to the cost of keeping these things. British electric consumption has fallen over the last 20 years, and this is due to, in part, to more efficient devices. The old-fashioned TVs have been gone. We know flat screen TVs, LED TVs, and these use a fraction of the energy of the old-fashioned valve TVs used to use. And I think they've saved households substantial money. But I think, but bear in mind that as regards electricity consumption, entertainment is now the biggest consumer of electricity in the home rather than anything else. So it's other devices have compensated for that. And I just mentioned BB, if you haven't done it already, but I think most people have, replace your light bulbs with LED bulbs. They last 20 years. Once you put them in, you don't have to think about it again. And they use a fraction of the electricity of the old-fashioned LEDs. Another thing to mention is smartphones. We're phasing out our landline phones and replace them with smartphones. And again, these devices use an awful lot less electricity than the smartphone did. So that's fairly good as well. That's devices in the home. I now mention cooking, because as well as heating and our entertainment devices and lighting, etc., we're going to have to switch the way we cook. When you cook with gas or ordinary electricity hobs, for that matter, you use an awful, they're very inefficient. You use an awful lot of energy. Most of the energy heats the air around the pot rather than the pot itself or the frying pan itself. So again, they're very inefficient devices. There are devices on the market now that can actually change that. And when we switch to stop using gas, these are probably the options to go for. There's things called induction hobs, which actually channel heat directly into the pot. They have special pots, and they channel heat directly into the pots themselves, meaning that you use an awful lot of electricity when it comes to boiling vegetables, etc. They are slow cookers, which you put stuff in the daytime. They're marvelous. I've one myself. You can cook a stew up that. You just put the ingredients in, switch them on for 8 hours, and you don't have to think about them again until the stuff is cooked, and you have no fear of no overheating or burning. You can go and watch telly or whatever, or go out to work and come back and you have a good meal, full meal available. And these devices are relatively cheap. Induction hobs aren't that cheap. I think they can range from about 150 to 400, maybe more, 400 to 600 quid to buy them, but they will be the ones used to replace gas hobs and the ordinary electric hobs in future. Another device worth mentioning is halogen ovens for your members. Halogen ovens, again, are quite cheap. And you can, they use electricity. They use halogen light to cook food. I've cooked chickens and etc. in mine, and veggie stews in mine, and they work quite well. And again, they're relatively efficient. The heat is going straight into the food you want cooked, rather than heating up the air around. Microwave ovens will have a part, but I know people are, that's a bit controversial for people. Some people like them, other people don't, and I won't mention it. I will mention one other thing, and that is smart electric meters. Three technologies are coming together, I think, in the next few years, and that is solar panels, smart electric meters, and batteries. And these have the potential to revolutionize the way we use energy. We install solar panels on our roofs. We install, I don't know, you might have heard of Tesla being publicizing their battery setup, where they have 7 kilowatts of battery power, which they can put into a house. And this will supply you with battery power at peak times when your solar isn't working, and you can use these devices at night time. But batteries are interesting because you can also charge them up off peak. So instead of paying 20p per kilowatt, you can pay 4.5 or 4.2p per kilowatt and use that electricity at peak times and save yourself a lot of money. These strategies are coming into play, and it's something we should look at when we're developing retrofit for our members, how we can make sure these fit. They will drop in price substantially, And the Chinese will be producing some very interesting models, but it's something, again, we need to think from in the future. And by the future, I mean the next year or two, not 10 years hence. All the stuff I talked about, I'll just mention something. How are we going to pay for all this? Well, let's start with our reserves. And many of our co-ops, our reserves are gone up because we basically, we're efficient organizations. My one generates about 25 to 30% profit every year on social housing rent. And this money is just sitting in banks. We can't find anything to do with it. Again, the best thing is to build new co-op properties with it, but we can't do that. One way is to upgrade our properties. We will have to do this anyway, because the mayor will insist that we do this, and the local council will insist that we upgrade our properties. So we may as well become relatively early into this, because the earlier we can get into this, the more grant money we can get. The grant money will dry up when it's more mainstream. So I think we can begin early adopters of this, these techniques. And I mentioned before, the other thing we can do, we save on gas checks when we do some of this stuff. And if we install, again, I'll circulate a paper I've written about that. If we combine installing solar panels with cyclical, when we have scaffolding up, we can save substantial amounts of money on that. Plus, if we put windows in, install triple glazing for our windows, PVC windows, etc., we don't have to touch these windows for 20, 25 years. So we save a fortune on our annual cyclical, not having to paint them every 5 years. Other ways, other sources coming, there are grants coming available at this. I won't talk too much about them. The Green Deal has been a disaster. There's a new grant called Social Housing Retrofit. I think Wave 1 has been launched, and it's planned to have I think, successive waves over the next 10 years. There's a government website for that. Again, I'll put that into the website and technical support stuff. And there's also various local council initiatives. Islington, Camden and Brent have schemes where community groups can apply for grants to do feasibility studies to see how suitable their properties are for retrofit. And also, in case of Islington, they'll get further grants if you can come up with ways of identifying innovative projects to upgrade your properties. This is all done under the banner of eco funding, which is a levy that is levied on the electricity supply. The big suppliers have to pay this, and the local authorities can tap into this to provide some alleviation of the fuel poverty, etc., and also to green their housing stock and green their property stock as well. All these schemes are rolling targets, so although you miss one role, might be one rolling target, will be others. Hopefully I'm hoping to work with Community Energy London, and we can get a list of these, and again, publicising on our website so people can take advantage of this. With that said, I'll move on to other stuff, but just one more thing. I've been working with a number of organisations working to do this. Repowering North London, Community Energy London, and Community Energy England, and Fuel Poverty Action Group. And I will put links after this meeting into our Facebook and website for these organisations. They're well worth looking up. And I mentioned about Energy Revolution. There is something, there's this person that might be worthwhile seeing. He's on YouTube, and he's called, I'll put a link in for him. He's called Tony Seaban. He specializes in disruption technologies. He's an economist, specializes in disruption technologies. And it's well worth seeing his hour-long presentation on energy if you want to find out more about this. With that said, I'll finish, and sorry about going on and being a little bit stream of consciousness about this. And I'll then bring in Waverley the 8th.
Shall I?
Yeah, continue on, Trevor.
Thanks,
yeah.
Thanks, Mick. I was just going to, I'm not on the agenda, so I'll just really quickly say
you are,
why
actually. Yeah.
Am I? Well, I'll just be quick. I'm a member of Waverley 8th. I'm also a sustainability consultant for a company called Bureau Happold. So I've got a bit of, it's a bit of a busman's holiday. Some of the, what I'm going to talk about. So with Waverley 8th, we applied for some funding from Islington Council to do a feasibility study. We've got about 12 Victorian properties split into about 26 flats and some shared houses. And so we've got an architect and a building performance engineer to look at all our houses. They did air tightness tests and tested how much insulation. We've got drilled holes here and there. And they put together a strategy which we are going to implement over the next 10 years. And really, the key bits of that maybe are, when our gas boilers break, we want to have a plan so we don't put in another gas boiler, but a heat pump or something similar. And we're getting our windows and doors done, and we want to get some external wall insulation and solar panels some way off. And I guess what I really wanted to do and why I was excited about coming to this meeting is because, I think we can all learn from each other. And also Mick just mentioned some of the retrofit housing funding, and some of that. So not only can we all learn from each other, but some of this funding, it might be easier to get hold of if we kind of, come together as a consortium. So, I hope that this is the first of these meetings that I attend, and there's more of them, and that we kind of go on and, share our experiences. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Trevor. Yes, I think we can. And don't forget, there'll be a further rounds from Islington, so apply for more cash from them.
Absolutely. Yeah, we will be. Yeah, there's the London Community Energy Fund that closed last month, but we just missed out on that. We had cavity wall, and it turned out we had cavity wall insulation anyway, so we didn't need it. Anyway, Glyn, did you have a question?
I was going to comment on what you just said, the London Community Energy Fund, which the Mayor has been open. We're on the 5th round of it now, and he's extended the range of things for which you can get grants for, like very early analysis of whether these schemes are possible, and then doing the greater deal until the last stage is capital funding. So, I think the Mayor has been very, very progressive on this field, and we should take advantage of it. One point I'd make is about air pumps. They are a good idea, but they will not work if there's poor insulation in the property. So before you do anything at all, it is important to sort that out, and that is relatively, in some cases, cheap to do. Draft proofing, new windows, although that's not cheap, but you've got to do that first. It's no good installing a heat pump and say it doesn't work, because that's why heat pumps have got a rather bad name. People have installed them and found that they haven't made any difference at all. In fact, sometimes more expensive. The fault lies not in the heat pump, but in the building that they're being installed into. And it is very important. I can't emphasize it too strongly. The other thing about heat pumps also, they do take some time to pay their way. You can install them, and then maybe 5 or 6 years before you get the full benefit of it.
Yeah, definitely. But at least they don't use gas. Oh, is Glyn frozen there?
Well, the key one about heat pumps, that's why you said I was a bit scathing of them. I didn't know they have their uses, and again, fabric first. You have to insulate your properties and seal your properties before you use them. But they are not going to drop in price. There's about 20 million of heat pumps being produced every year worldwide. The UK say this idea that they're going to drop in price substantially is not going to happen. And they're about 16,000 quid to install. So you have to make substantial savings in order to make them efficient without some form of grant funding. But, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's again, it's horses for courses. They're suitable for some stuff.
I think we're all going on a journey to find out, actually. Okay. I think what we're going to do is trial them out on some houses. And I think we've got some big, we've got some of the properties which are all one house. Yeah. And so I live in one of those in a shared house. And so our boiler's really old. And so it's, we'll probably try it on here, if perhaps. And then we've got some flats, which would probably, and they're on combi boilers, so they probably need a different system. And again, trial it out on one flat and see how it goes, and see what works and what doesn't work before kind of rolling it out.
Brilliant.
Or not.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm keen to get Charlie in. Charlie, do you want to come in and give your talk now?
Yep. I'm just unmuting my video now.
Yep.
You can see my happy little face to compare with all the other aging faces of people I haven't seen for 20 years. All right, Ron. All right, Greg. And who else is still here? Oh, Glyn's gone. Oh no, there he is. He's just muted himself. Hi, Glyn. It's been a while. Right, so I shall just a couple of corrections, Mick. The standard assessment procedure is what generates your EPC. It's a reduced data version, but your energy performance certificate then isn't a percentage of efficiency, it's a score. The score does actually go over 100. I regularly do SAP assessments for retrofits that get to 105. It's not a percentage. It's not the efficiency of your home. It's unfortunately not a particularly good measure of the energy efficiency of your property, because it includes the cost of the energy, because it was intended to be a kind of holistic measure of the whole thing. You should go and have a look at LETI, because that's down your neck of the woods. The London Emissions, oh come on Trevor, what's the T and the I stand for?
And London Energy Transformation Initiative.
Thank you. Chris Twins on that, among many others. They've published some brilliant work. I've just been having an agreement fest with Glyn on the UKGBC zero carbon pathway. You want to start moving towards your energy consumption per square metre per annum, because then you can actually compare them all. Our average in the UK at the moment is somewhere around 160-ish, depending on who you ask and when you ask them. And a good retrofit can get as low, well, passive house can get as low as 10 or 15, but that costs you a fortune, because you're chasing all the little bits of air everywhere. I've managed to get to 25 on a terraced house relatively easily. A semi you can get to 40. It's a bit pricey, but I think we've alighted on a target of 50. The other thing was that the current coefficient of performance for a heat pump is still actually not disagreeing that much with the research from the Fraunhofer Institute of about a decade ago, which therefore keeps it out of the hands of the manufacturers. But it's about 3.75, 3.5 for an air source heat pump, and up to 4.5 for a ground source heat pump. Just those little corrections there. Oh, and by the way, your scaff costs, I was surprised that you're £1,500 per kilowatt installed. Is that just the joys of you being in that there London? Because it's an awful lot cheaper up here, up north, but then it is grim up north.
No, that was the last time I looked. I think I looked at the web page was out of date, and that was the reason I just picked up on that. I am aware that prices are plummeting in this stuff.
Okay, I shall move on to my presentation now, and there we go. You should be able to see a little cartoon from my good friend Paul Fitzgerald, otherwise known as Pollet. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, I shall be as quick as I can, because you said you were going to be 5 minutes, Mick, and in classic housing co-op form, you took 25. I'd forgotten. I've not been in housing co-ops for a bit. I left to crack on with retrofit about 15 years ago, and I'd forgotten about the joys of time in the housing co-op world. I shall try and see if I can create a time-space continuum back to get us back on track. Obviously, you all know we're in a massive emergency, and I am getting really bored of local authorities declaring climate emergencies, which seems to mean you just have a meeting. Realistically, if your house was on fire, you wouldn't sit down and have a meeting about what to do with your house being on fire. You'd do something about it, and you'd do it now. But yes. The point is, though, that all the emissions are not equal. I suspect we're in the bottom, most of us are in the bottom 5th percentile of energy consumption, but just check out the blue band in the top 5th percentile. That the rich of this country are using more on transport than are the entire emissions footprint of the bottom 25% of the country's population. So obviously we need to burn the rich, but I suspect most of you already know that. But we can do our bit, and then we can lead by example and make the rich even more unpopular than they already are, as if they weren't doing such a good job by themselves. Carbon budget is the classic problem, and this is an old graph. but it's a useful infographic that if we want to, that the thing about the temperatures is it's all about a probability, it's not definite. And therefore, to increase our probability, we need to use less carbon now. And we've got perilously little time. So actually, this is from 2017. So we've already launched the chances of a 66% chance of remaining below 1.5 degrees. And in fact, realistically, we are only at about 50% to 33% of that. If we don't give a monkeys, like the the consultant from the Centre for Cities that said the day before yesterday that it was going to take 100 years to decarbonise, then obviously you're up at 3 degrees centigrade. And as I pointed out to him in the chat, what's the point of a city if you've already lost organised society by that point, which 3 degrees centigrade will do. There is no climate scientist telling you it's going to be anything other than an absolute catastrophe. And yet we're still having meetings about it. I've been at retrofit for 15 years now, and I still feel like I'm standing still. I work quite closely with the Tyndall Centre on stuff. They've looked at emissions reduction targets to try and keep that area in blue, the area under the graph, to fit within our carbon budget. And we've done jack shit about it, frankly, since then, to use the technical term. Apologies for the swearing on a Saturday morning for those of you with more delicate temperament. However, we could do this if we got our proverbials together. This is a calculator that David Mackay put together back in 2013, but it's still the only viable calculation system going to show you how all of our emissions interlink. So there's a link at the bottom there because we grabbed it off Bayes, off Deck as it was at the time rather, and we put it on our own servers. And so you can go and have a play with that yourself. It is a bit out of date, as I said, because we've carried on emitting since. So that 950 megatons, 9.5 gigatons of available carbon budget left. We've eaten many, many more megatons of that. But it shows how everything is interrelated, and that an awful lot of demand reduction needs to happen on the one side, alongside an awful lot of renewable generation. You need to be generating renewables everywhere. But nuclear isn't the answer because it's too darn slow. And everyone then thinks it's business as usual, carries on eating the carbon budget, and we're a bit stuffed. Although I did have a Tyndall Centre graduate try and tell me that nuclear could still work because you could use it to hydrolyse the water to generate the hydrogen for all those people getting themselves jiggy about the hydrogen. My big deal is retrofit, and it's about reducing the energy demand of our homes and doing it as soon as we can. One of the things I couldn't help but notice was the mayor's idea that he was going to be zero carbon by 2030. I bet he ain't going to do that with the current building boom going on for tower blocks in London, because it would appear that we've got this carbon elephant going on. That graph in the top right hand corner was from a piece of work that Simon Sturgis did for the RICS a few years ago that shows that half the emissions of a building are in building it. Another 6 are in maintaining it, and the bit that everyone's getting lathered about zero carbon blah blah is actually only that remaining third, and that the other 2/3 is just like broken biscuits in your biscuit tin. They've got no calories in them apparently. You can eat them as much as you like. We can build as much in your housing as we like as long as it uses no energy to use it, because the energy to build it's invisible. The climate isn't going to notice. So according to his calculations, a new home is 50 to 80 tonnes of CO2 to build. And I'll bet you if you're sticking it 50 floors up on a concrete tower block, it's a lot more than that. Obviously, if we retrofit our homes, my calculations of a retrofit are even with the new windows, it's about 5 tonnes. Double that if you do it in fossil fuel derived foams. But I don't need to mention Grenfell to you. You don't do it. You shouldn't do it. We shouldn't be doing it. We don't need to do it. It's not good for the environment anyway. So it is fabric first, but it's not fabric only. And as I said, we can get to 40 kilowatt hours per square metre per annum. And then if we were really going for it, we can get to a point where there's enough roof space to generate enough energy for the year off the roof. Use the grid as the battery, go and pump it up a hill in Scotland, stick it in some batteries, hydrolyse some water, compress some air, all the various storage technologies going. You start with EWI because external wall insulation. I've been saying this for 13 years now, but 0.2 watts per square metre per annum is a good number to aim at. It does mean you need to extend the eaves and verges on houses like this, but it's not heinous. And it does mean that for your average interwall semi, you can actually easily accommodate the wall insulation within the existing eaves, saves you some cash. And so you can take a basket case of a house like that and make it look like that. little bit of a Club Med moment, and you save that 50 tons of CO2. But the other thing you do as well is you save the communities that are living in these, because an awful lot of communities are living in substandard housing, and demolishing it and rebuilding it and gentrifying the areas sure as hell ain't the answer. Retrofitting really, really is. Internal wall insulation, where for development control reasons, or just because the householder doesn't want it, the building owner doesn't want it, you don't want to spoil the outside of the building, you can do it internally, but it's technically a lot more difficult, especially when you get curved bays. In lofts, we've been creating rooms and roofs so that you can create a bit more space in tiny terraces. And there's a performance target for them. We've been devising our own internal wall insulation system because it is so disruptive, needs so many skills. So we've been working out one that uses a much lower skill set, and I'm still developing that. Basically, you put insulated wood fibre studs on the wall first, so that if your house catches fire, you've not put any toxins in the wall. Floors, quite a challenge up here, and I think they are quite a challenge down your way as well, what with the Thames being nearby and its water level going up every year. So that house on the right there, I put a land drain in under theirs because there was so much water underneath this floor that it was getting really wet. We've been using recycled glass pumice as our insulation. It's got no certification, no insurance, so we've put some sensors under a floor of the last installation we did, and we're going to try and see how it actually does. We did put some, I put some into a property for one of the retrofit for the future houses in Rotherham in 2010, and Rotherham Council have not rung me up and said, mate, our floors have rotted, so maybe it is all right. Windows and doors, as one of you said, they are the pricey bit, but they're worth doing. You can put triple glazing in, you can remove the mullions and the transoms that are an energy basket case to let more light in, let less heat out. That top right hand corner is me hand building a vacuum insulated panel door so we could create insulated doors, not for external use, that was in a lobby, so there was already a weatherproof door outside of it. The windows are a difficult one because the order period on windows is about 9 weeks. And upward, so our internal wall insulation system has been devised around ordering the windows when you start the wall insulation, and in such a way that you can finish the job off once the windows are in. And you'll notice that we took all the mullions out, so you just get more light in. And I think it doesn't spoil the character of the property, although I haven't had that debate. Well, that's in a conservation area, so I got away with it. But where you can't replace the windows, can't afford it, don't want to do it, want to keep the stained glass, secondary glazing, rebuilding the rotten casements and draft proofing your stashes is a way around it, but you don't get anything like the energy performance out of it. So this is my house from 2007, and we did actually put some additional PVC, some acrylic secondary glazing on top of those, stuck on sticky back pieces of magnetic strip, which is a really cheap way of insulating your windows because you can pop them off in the summer and stick them behind the wardrobe, and then put them back on in the winter, and which is one of the only budget bits of retrofit you can actually do. Cold bridging and air tightness is the missing piece from EPC certification, which is why I'm having an ongoing argument with Parity Projects about their continuing reliance on it, and they are finally starting to bring in some of this. But basically, when you're heading towards very low energy use on a building, what they call the C value of air tightness, although it then turns out to be a Y value in other bits of SAP, you can lose another 15% of your heat losses from that. And then the air tightness, similarly, that you can another 15% again, or more, depending on just how much of a basket case your house is. But that house on the right is industry custom and practice EWI. So they've left an enormous cold bridge around the gas inlet. They've decided to stop the EWI at the DPC for some reason. So there's another enormous cold bridge there because it's a retrofitted DPC, which means you've got a nice little black smudge along the bottom of the carpet indoors because of that. And then they do this daft thing over bay windows where they leave a 6-inch gap rather than changing the insulation to something that can cope and covering off that cold bridge there. And so you can see that you get these cold bridges in the corners and you can lose an awful lot of heat out of them, and they can also be uncomfortable, but also depending on the internal humidity of the property, you can get little bits of mildew at those points. So the house we've just finished retrofitting, we've only been doing a part retrofit, and I'm trying to advise them to get some ventilation. Their humidity levels are hovering at 72%, despite my house here being at about 40%. And that means that the dew point, the point at which water falls out of the air and lands on things, is high enough to be able to then condense on those bluer bits of that picture. So you get condensation on your windows in the morning that then accelerates the rot of your windows, but you then also get these little patches around the house where it grows. Moisture handling is another one, therefore. So most houses have been painted with acrylic paints, please stop. And most houses have been plastered with gypsum. If you can stop, it'll be useful. And what that means is moisture is not buffered by old lime mortar and lime render and vapor permeable paints. And so the internal masonry of a property has an enormous role to play in buffering internal moisture levels. But obviously ventilation is the big winner. Services, let's not do that right-hand picture where you spend a whole load of money on external wall insulation and then stick the scruffy plastic PVC downpipes covered in years of masonry paint back on, but you'll notice the little swan neck at the bottom for the poop to get caught in. Instead, put an air admittance valve halfway up that because you no longer need that stack if you enclose it. And so that's a bit of UK grown larch covering up something not dissimilar to what is on that right-hand picture. And then use your chimneys. If you've still got them, put your ventilation up them. You don't need to have heat recovery ventilation, but it's worth thinking about. Passive stack ventilation can be quite handy up a chimney, especially if you've got undercrofts that you can use to modify the air on its way in. The problem we've encountered with passive stack is you can get drafts on the air inlet, and certainly people in fuel poverty have a tendency to wander around all of the passive vents and stick them up with sticky tape. So that air inlet grill on the top right is underneath the sofa of a house we did on Winter Hill in Bolton. Because they've got a gale blowing into the front of the house. Trickle vents there would have been really, really uncomfortable. But they had a nice, generous undercroft with no rot in it. And once we'd finished insulating it, we kept the moisture away from it. And so that's underneath their sofa. And they say they occasionally, with a high wind, get an occasional flicker of a draft around their ankles, but the rest of the time they don't. Mick already mentioned this. Get PV on your roofs wherever you can. It is a no-brainer, especially if you put 8 to 10 kilowatt hours of battery storage in. The problem with lithium is you can't actually discharge a battery fully. So to get 10 kilowatts of energy storage, you actually need to have about 12 to 13 kilowatts of energy storage. Fortunately, the nice Mr. Musk has produced a battery of that size. I've done optimal modelling for Manchester, and actually 8 kilowatts is about optimal. That extra 2 kilowatt hours depends entirely on whether you are going to do the next bit, which I'll come on to, which is about the battery storage being aggregated across multiple players so that you can trade the energy. Heat pumps, I'm going to disagree with you completely here, Mick. Heat pumps can go everywhere as long as you insulate the property properly first, as Glyn said. And that's why it's a fabric first approach. You can use ground source, because ground source isn't just about pipes buried in the ground, known in the trade as slinkies. You can do them with boreholes. So that rig in the bottom right there is in my back garden. And in fact, that picture on the left is in my cellar. So I've got a ground source heat pump. Now, the problem is the government has killed off ground source heat pumps because they've leveled the playing field, unfortunately. So I get enough renewable heat incentive for this heat pump to cost me no more per year than I was paying the year before on my biomass gasifying log burning system, which I took out because of the air quality issues of Manchester. Ground air source heat pumps are therefore cheaper, and the new clean heat grant is only a flat fee of £5,000, but that's enough to pay for a heat pump if you've insulated first, because then you don't need to change your emitters, the radiators, and therefore you don't need to change your pipework to 22 mil, because the amount of heat the property needs is so much less that you can provide the heat from those existing radiators even though they're only at 40 degrees. A whole lot of people say, oh no, you can't run the heat round at 40, you've got to run it round at 35. But actually the dent in the coefficient of performance is minor. It's about 5% on our system. We went up an extra 5 degrees just so that we had more flexibility. And that then gives you that opportunity to then just put the heat pump in. And if you've reduced the heat demand sufficiently, the cost of installation and the heat pump can be as low as £4,000, which is therefore covered by obviously depends on the size of the property. One of the things that we're part of a project on in Greater Manchester is looking at ground source as a shared loop system. So if you have got a block of flats and you've got enough ground to drill a borehole, and the great thing about London is boreholes are really easy because your ground's soft as soft stuff. We've got rock underneath Manchester because we're hard up here. But you can drill down, how far is it? About 30 metres before you hit anything actually solid under London. I've got 3 boreholes at 85 metres each. And yes, it made a mess of the garden. We had a reenactment of Passchendaele going on in the garden. We just lacked that we even had the duck boards. But it's been really useful. And this idea that they're difficult to run, they're only difficult to run if we carry on being obsessed with this idea that our heating comes on for 2 hours in the morning and comes on for 3 hours in the afternoon. The Lithuanian guy that's put my control system in for mine said, they said the Eastern Europeans just don't understand what we're on. They just insulate their homes properly and then leave the heating on as long as it needs to be to keep the house warm, because the heat isn't leaving every time the wind blows or just continuously because the houses are so badly insulated. So then there is no behaviour change necessary other than just don't mess with the controller. So my house is at a balmy 20 degrees at the moment. And it's costing me less than it cost me last year. So yes, it can pay for itself instantly. The great grail we can aim at is that zero carbon retrofit is possible. If we go for energy efficient appliances and we go for really going out on the retrofit so that we can get our space heating down to 25 kilowatt hours per square metre per annum, you need 7.2 megawatt hours of energy in a year. If you can get 5 kilowatts of PV on your roof in Manchester, and that's probably as low as 4.5 or 4 in that London, because it's warmer down your way and the sun shines more often, you can then balance, once you've got that heat pump at a coefficient of performance of 3.75, your heat needs are the same as what you generate off the roof. So our proposition to West Yorkshire, and repeat, we wrote for them last year, is that you add all of that lot together and we can get to zero carbon by 2038 because that's their target. But we can also get rid of fuel poverty by 2030, and the only cost to the public purse is generating the workforce, although we ought not to underestimate that. That we did with SHAP and the University of Salford. It's online on SHAP's website if you go to their website and look at retrofit. The numbers then, so all of you will be dying to know how much this is all going to cost you, because you're going to run away from here and instantly get your retrofit strategies up and going. Obviously, the nearer to zero you get, the higher the costs go. Those figures are not massively accurate because they're taken from a variety of different sources and different ways of counting it, but they give an inkling of how much it can cost. So there's no point in going for absolute passive house levels because you're paying 80 grand, 90 grand a property because you're pretty much dismantling it. If you looked at those costs and you then converted them to loans, the amount of annual cost is going to be dependent on the cost of your finance. So if you can get some public loans, some public works loan board or some nice, or go and buddy up to London and Quadrant and see if you can get hold of some of their 1.6% bonds that they issued a couple of years ago, then you can reduce that annual cost of paying for your retrofit down to something that you might be able to afford. So in Manchester, we've got people here paying £2,000 a year in their utility bills because their houses are so badly insulated. And so at which point you can see that actually they could get a long way to zero. And in fact, if we put the energy storage and PV on top of that, they will be at zero. Obviously, the problem being that your bill savings are linear. So you've got a sweet spot where your cost recovery for your retrofit meets the savings that you made. And so that's why cost of finance is so critical. We can add in PV and battery, but if you're just doing self-consumption, the extra capital cost of the PV and the battery means that whilst your sweet spot moves a little bit further up, it doesn't go as far as it can. The big opportunity is once you aggregate your and all your batteries, and you've got enough housing stock across London, and you're all in the same DNO, I think, district network operator for your power. So you should be able to then create, I'm told by Flexitricity, I've got a meeting with him on Monday, that if I can assemble 600 domestic batteries, then he will give me my own account on his trading platform. He wants 35% of the income, but I'm hoping once the volume builds up, he'll reduce that. And then you can start to bring in those incomes. So we can take retrofit that's this year way too expensive and look at basically the David Brailsford School of Incremental Gains, or in this case, incremental reductions, and reduce the cost of everything. We can get better at it on our labour. We can reduce the materials cost because we've got more economies of scale. We can get a bit of innovation in our IT to reduce the prelims. And then obviously, whilst PV probably isn't going to drop a lot more in cost because it's done that, batteries are due to come down a bit. So if you took those costs and you did different kinds of borrowing over different years, you'll see that if you look at the revenue stack that you're going to generate to pay for your retrofit, from the combination of your gas bill reduction, your electricity bill reduction, your additional savings from self-consumption, and then your grid sales income, you'll break even in 6 or 7 years. Obviously, that means that the first retrofits you do are a basket case because they are massively too expensive. But as you bring more retrofits forward and the industry develops and your economies of scale develop, you can make it work. So the logic therefore is expose yourself minimally to those early years, so the losses are containable. I mean, when I say containable, but that's 5 million quid across the whole of the West Yorkshire region. It's not a lot of money in overall terms. Obviously, that's scalable to an extent. But if we bring in the PV storage and program early, because it's easier to scale that up because there's more kit, less people, and we just don't have the people, then that means that you can build up some additional income very early on that you can use to subsidise those early retrofits. And what that means is that we can also stay much closer to the carbon abatement curves that the climate scientists say we need. We're still a few million tonnes across the West Yorkshire region short on that, but it's better than anybody's doing at the moment. And then the great thing about that additional income up front is that you can then lend out to people in fuel poverty, and you'll have enough of an income to be able to do those as unsecured, and possibly in some cases interest only. You'd have to balance your portfolio to make that work. We managed to get it to work for the numbers we were using, so you could get rid of fuel poverty altogether rather than the tinkering around the edges, because a Tory government does like a bunch of poor people to point and laugh at, and I don't. It's complicated. It involves an awful lot of people working together, but there's an awful lot of stuff happening in London. There's a link to the report at the bottom. It involves a whole lot of components, different bits that you need action on. Some of those are happening, some less so. But the customer journey in housing co-ops is a little easier because you're already talking to your tenants are your members. You can decide for yourselves how you do the cost recovery, because you can make yourselves the final bill payers if you take on the utility payments on behalf of your tenants. But at least you'll be able to talk to the tenants about varying non-qualifying service charges, possibly even a rent rise, although I know how unpopular they can be. But if you look at the total cost of occupation of the property, so it's the rent plus the utility bills, you would make sure that you generated a proposition to your members that kept that as it is now, or even reduces a little depending on the state of the properties. We do need those whole house retrofit plans to bring that into gear, and that's coming. I think that I'm told, Russell tells me that Paris will be launching free stuff in January, so you can do it for yourself, and then they'll be launching something a little bit more scientific for the deeper dive. We've already put all of our detailing up online that we did for the Green Deal Go Early project back in 2014. You've got energy sprung down your way. Interesting. I don't think it's not for everybody, it's not for everything, but it's a really interesting idea that they're expecting contractors to put a performance guarantee on for 30 years. Because that's the big thing. It means that the contractors make the effort. Obviously, Mick mentioned the storage. Basically, you're taking the energy when you've got it and moving it to when you need it. And you can make quite a lot of money off that. We're looking at between 60 and 80 pounds per year per kilowatt hour of storage. You need some aggregation to make that work, and that obviously requires a bit of effort. But I think things will move on that soon, because they can also become that they are logically a cooperative enterprise, and that's the great thing. One of the things that we all know about co-ops is they don't set them up where a standard commercial model will work, but actually in this case we do need cooperation. The finance vehicle is the big bit, and I think I mentioned this to David Rogers the other day, that the old mutual home ownership, the mutual loan guarantee scheme that he set up before the mutual home ownership scheme was a really interesting idea. That if you can improve the covenant of your lending by pooling your assets together to be able to borrow money institutionally cheaply, you can really eat into your cost of finance, so that you could actually deliver the retrofits that you need. And the great thing about a finance vehicle is it then means that if you can sell bonds to those able to pay, and do loans at just below high street rates, so you'll get the able to pay in there with their really good quality of covenant, then it means you've got enough money to be able to then lend to those who've not got a farthing to rub together. Obviously, the shape of that kind of vehicle is fundamentally different in London because your properties are such a ridiculous price, but that works outside London. And the great thing about a finance vehicle is that because you're lending to people's homes, you want to then also have a good quality maintenance service next to it, so that the value of the asset you've lent into isn't reduced. And we could even start to produce some lending opportunities to private landlords. Comes from lots of different places. There's loads of places to get the money. And the cost of the source of finance for you, you've got the social housing. Well, presumably Islington is bidding for the social housing decarbonisation fund. But it only takes you to a C. You've got to put up a third of the costs. And we've missed the deadline for the last batch, but I'm told there might be another round of SHDF. But there are other things that you can look at. As I said, you can look at a service charge to replace some of the bill savings. So you can say, right, I'm about to save you £1,000 a year. Could I have 800 quid of it back, 900 quid of it back? And actually, because you're a co-op, you can actually monitor that and make it a floating charge, make it a charge that is actually based on cost. As I said, rent increases, less handy, but when you do relets, there's an opportunity, but then nobody leaves the housing co-op these days, do they? Because it's the cheapest housing on the planet, and therefore people stay until they cart it out in a box. I know this because Homes for Change has the same problem. I keep looking at their little faces and thinking, oh, bless, aren't we all getting on? But we need to develop capacity. We need to do it urgently. We need to stop doing pilots and get on with some scale. You need to talk to Islington about borrowing some money so that you can act as those people in the lead, because we've got to do some deep enough retrofits to show it can be done. But we are desperately short of a workforce, desperately, desperately. Those guys up on that scaffolding are former theatre workers I put to work during the pandemic. We're not the only people saying this. The Construction Leadership Council reckons that there's 700,000 jobs. And so the next time you hear the RMT protesting about loss of jobs in the oil rigs, tell them to give their heads a wiggle, because actually there's way, way more jobs than there are currently in the North Sea available on land. So you can actually see your families in between that as well. And you can do something existentially useful, because we've got no construction workforce. Most of the skilled tradespeople are our age, and they are therefore wanting to have a little sit down, and their backs are bad and their joints are failing. But then on top of that, we've ended our contract with the EU to train our construction workforce for us, and they've all gone back to Poland and Bulgaria and Latvia and Lithuania and Germany. And so we're in deepest doo-doo. There is this opportunity to create Construction 2.0, because there is almost no retrofit workforce. And so we can do that thing where we can generate customer trust with new people. We can get rid of macho behaviour on sites. We can get people more competent, and we can create a proper tolerant environment so that we do attract people that don't otherwise go into construction, so that we can make construction aspirational. And the thing I love about it is the actual satisfaction you have in a proper job that isn't working in a call centre selling crap to someone that doesn't want it. You're actually doing something that is useful for the species. So we did this thing with theatre workers. You can search the retrofit Get In and see a little video of my happy little face. The premise is simple. Take all of those different bits of retrofit that you need to have done. Look at all the trades that can currently be redirected to do them, but we're desperately short, and then see which ones will then fit into doing them. And so we took 12 theatre workers. As I said, I redesigned the internal wall insulation system because some of this got a bit complicated. We managed to work throughout COVID, and touch wood, none of us got it. The things we're looking for are things that anyone in education recognises. In many cases, I can teach people the information. I just need people to be able to use a tape measure and a spirit level. And so what we did was we redesigned the insulation system so that we could reduce the number of skills, totted them up. And what we needed was about 15, those are outside London pay rates, I realise. And in fact, ever since in the last year, those rates have gone up. Fully skilled's now about 25 quid an hour. But we managed to get to a point where I can actually train people up. Sadly, our training infrastructure is not geared up for this, and they wouldn't listen. We lost 10 people out into going nowhere jobs because there was no money for us to train them, no courses appropriate, because the colleges don't have any retrofit experts to train people in anyway. So we've got a bit of work to do on that one, and we need to do it all at once. So we need to be looking at building that market, starting to gather the data, scaling up the deployment of PV and storage, getting a finance vehicle capitalised, getting some properties done now, and start to generate the jobs. But if we can do all of that, then we can do this. We can create those really nice houses that's an awful house underneath that. The one on the right of it is what it looked like before we started. Really not pretty, little bits of damp all over the place, drafts everywhere, noisy from the noise on the street, triple glazed windows, inward openings so we could ditch the opening quarter lights on the top so you get more light in. We even did some off-site construction as well, because actually a lesser skilled workforce can be much more easily deployed if you're in a factory setting where you can keep control of quality, and we used CNC cutting for some of this as well. We did the same with the floor. We replaced a loft floor. The guy on the right is a set builder, the guy on the left is a key grip for a film company, then an artist and an artist's fabricator. We built the bay window off site as well, and then I tried steam bending. I've been making curved skirtings so that we can also do retrofit where it's actually refurbishing properties but keeping them. I mean, I'll get drummed out the modernist brownies for this, but I've now done curved replica cornices around the rooms. But this got 14,000 hits on Twitter last week. It was which is unheard of for retrofit realistically. But we can also make places nicer. So this is the other thing about, you've probably already done this in London because you're digging out your cellars to put properties in them. But up here in Manchester, there are still people not using their lofts. We pretty much added a whole flat onto the top floor of that one. This one here, it's just one extra bedroom, but also then everything made out of timber, so you're counting where the carbon is. And we've got this once in a lifetime opportunity to do this. We really ought to not squander it. And we can do the non-domestic properties as well. Sorry, Jan, you told me half an hour on the phone the other day, Mick, so I took me half an hour. But in fact, I noticed in the intro, then you said 20 minutes. So I've probably left the next speaker almost no time to speak.
Don't worry, don't worry. I think there's a bit of bad news. We haven't heard from our next speakers yet, so...
Oh, I took all the stuff about energy out because I thought Celsius were coming next.
Oh, stick it back in then. Do you want to go on?
No, I bore myself after a bit.
Oh, fair enough.
Let's take some questions on this bit because the energy...
No, this is brilliant, Nick. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
So I had a message from Alex that she suffered a bereavement and wasn't going to be in circulation. I've left her to see if she was going to be able to make it today or not, rather than chasing her. So I think she's not going to be able to make it for those personal reasons.
Yeah, bereavement versus talking to us a lot. I'm not sure. I can see which one takes first call on that one. That's a shame. I'm presuming there's lots of questions after that, or have I just blown you into submission?
Well, I'll kick off the questions then. You mentioned Tesla and Musk about the battery storage. What's your opinion of BYD? They seem to be far cheaper than Tesla's offer.
Well, with all of the thing with all of this is you need to be careful. What we encountered in PV was that, and I've had to relamp buildings. I've lamped with cheap Chinese. Well, all of our LEDs come from China, but they have a different method of export where the really low quality stuff goes to the cheap box shifters. And then if people want it testing properly and have a proper high quality stuff, you pay 5 times the amount. And so the LEDs started blowing well inside their lifespans. And you get the same problem with PV, that the degradation factors on PV panels, if they're not well made, you can be losing 2% of their efficiency every year. Whereas the sun powers that have been much more firmly tested, you only lose about 0.25% a year. So you've still got most of the energy coming out of them at the end of the usage period. Batteries are the same, and if anything, actually, they're slightly more complex. You've got to have charge management onto batteries to make sure that you don't cook them. They're remarkably temperamental. Most of it's automated, but if you haven't got the right circuitry on that and you haven't got the right remote supervision of the batteries, which again is where aggregation comes in handy because your aggregator can do your remote supervision for you, then you've got that, and then you've also got how many charge cycles they'll handle. So there are many, I've seen several things suggesting that the warranties on batteries are 1 full discharge per day, and if you start to go outside of that, you lunch the warranty. So you need to go and ask for what you need to go and ask and do the research. I think the ones I've been modelling for our projects here at LG, and I'm of that opinion that you never buy the cheapest on the market. You always go for the ones in the middle of your tender set. But do an awful lot of checking first, and especially if you're going to do a larger scale rollout. But I think batteries are becoming quite a mature technology now. I think the market hasn't matured enough yet for them to be at the price we want. But I have seen some figures that up to 5 megawatts, domestic PV and battery is cheaper than digging up a field and putting it all in the field, because you don't have to pay the grid connection costs. And so and because obviously you've already got the support frameworks there as well, because you're putting them on the roof. And then I noticed that Tom Lipinski at Ventive has produced an energy pod. Well worth going to have a look on Ventive's website, seeing where they're up to. They're, I think, currently only making them for Energiesprong, but the mayor has thrown his weight behind. Your mayor has thrown his weight behind Energiesprong. It'd be worth keeping an eye on that. Currently, they're only aiming at the buildings that you saw in the Dutch photo, that they're aiming at the 60s stuff, that's good flat walls and enough repetition to make it worthwhile, and then not lots of fussy outriggers on the back. But most of the stuff that needs retrofitting in Manchester, the urgent stuff, is 19th century stock. But he's got, therefore, a modular system that you could have everything into, and then if stuff starts to fall off, you can just basically disconnect it, crane it back over the building, or roll it back down the side of the building and swap it for a new one.
Right. Is there any more questions for Charlie? I know it's I found this stuff fascinating. So bear with me while I check the participants. Ah, yeah. Colin Penn, do you want to come in? You need to unmute.
Well, I tried that and it didn't work. Hi. During my working life, I tried a couple of times to set up schemes whereby we provided a vehicle to get trainees in, take training from a skilled tradesman, and set up our own service and construction and repairs. Is there any mileage in adopting that model in what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I think we have to be doing. I think that was what I offered the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I said, right, I've got 10 theatre workers. They've got basic skills. They've mostly got trained. They've all got their working at height certification. They're house trained. We just need to get them skilled up. Here's what we want to train them in. Here's how much it's going to cost. The differential cost between a trainee doing some work and what we can charge a customer. And then we were going to get a secondee from the local college to help with that, so that there was somebody that understood training, because quite a lot of tradespeople don't, and I certainly don't. I'm just way too impatient and need a moderator in between me and people I'm trying to train. Otherwise, I hurt them mentally. I have it on reliable information. So yes, I think that's exactly what we need. So we've been working with a company called B for Box, which trains ex-offenders, long-term unemployed, and care leavers. That's not him, that's one of their trainers. We've had some success with them. They're a bit slow, so again, we still need some assistance that way. But my view is that we should be moving away from the box ticking MVQ of too many of our colleges, because they're paid by numbers. They're not paid by actual skill, results, work on site. They're paid by the number of people and the number of MVQ credits. And with the best will in the world, it's almost impossible to make that work. Whereas a competent person scheme, which interestingly, plumbers and electricians still do, because you can kill people if you haven't got the skills right on either of them. And I think a competent person scheme would work just as well. And I've talked to the head of regulation at Trustmark, and they think that could be a runner. So we could, as you say, find somebody that knows their onions, team them up with someone that knows how to do training, and then actually try and attract some funding in from somewhere. Or even realistically, if there were enough people prepared to see that it was worth investing in, to actually try and create some direct investment. I mean, having just watched People Powered Retrofit raise £600,000 on FX, despite them only wanting it for working capital. So that's an awful lot of people who seem willing to see their money not come back, just wanting to see anything happen. Then maybe that is an option.
I will have a conversation with you about this later on, Charlie, if that's all right.
Sure.
I think I can, I have a few ideas, might be helpful. Is there any more questions for Charlie? Niall, come in.
Yeah, thanks. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I can't see myself for some reason, but yeah, it's been very interesting. I was just wondering on the issue of retrofitting. I mean, in somewhere like London, there's tens of thousands, I think, of empty buildings, and there's campaigns, you know, that they should be turned into public housing, social housing of some sort. And it's something co-ops should look at. But some of them are in a terrible state. I mean, there's like a place just down the end of my road, an abandoned Victorian factory, which probably could house, I don't know, could be several flats at least in it. But at what point does that become, you know, at what point can you retrofit, or if you like completely refurbish a building like that? Is that viable, or is it better to start from scratch and knock these things down and rebuild? I mean, I agree that in general terms, you know, we want to avoid knocking down old buildings if they can be saved, if you like, and it's not going to, I know there's a whole issue of carbon density and so on. And then some councils are very keen to build on top of existing buildings. So just what your thoughts are about that, Charlie?
Again, outside London, I think it's a no-brainer that you retrofit it. Inside London, because you've got so much stress on every square foot of land to have more housing on it, you've always got somebody wanting to put more, max out the number of stories they can get. I was reading the stuff yesterday about TfL wanting to put tower blocks on Cockfosters tube station and High Barnet tube station, everyone getting very, very vexed about it. So I don't know. So when you say viability, I think that's, I mean, technically you can retrofit anything you want. You know, you've only got to watch some of the grand designs where people take a wrecked castle in the middle of nowhere and manage to put a house inside it. The issue is then access to skilled tradespeople and the cost value proposition. For me, the other thing though is the serendipity of it, that whenever anyone knocks down a building and builds a new one, it's always cookie cutter stuff. It's always, there's no spirit, there's no love, there's no joy in the building. Whereas when you refurbish an old building, you find all sorts of weird things that some Victorian craftsman stuck in the building that you can bring to the fore. There's usually a cellar you can do something interesting with, and especially in our need for heat storage and things like that, there's always that opportunity to salvage those. But how you put a value on that, I don't know. But certainly in my view, if we had access to enough skilled tradespeople, then retrofit is far more viable. The problem is that at the building new, you don't need anything like the same level of skill. You don't need a proper plasterer. You just need somebody with a bag of drywall adhesive and some joint filler and some sticky tape, and a screw, and then they just do dot and dab. Your brickies are hiding, and in a lot of cases it's external cladding made in a factory anyway. And so, whereas retrofit, you've got to be able to actually adapt what you're doing to what you find when you strip the building down. And the number of times I discover there's no lintel or there's inadequate bearing on it. And once I've discovered there's inadequate bearing on it, I'm duty bound to then sort that out and put a new lintel in. Not wildly expensive, but it is a variation. So there's a whole load of contract issues as well. So I'm a big fan of the cooperative contractor approach. I've been trying to see if there's a version of retrofit works, which you've got down there, that could be much more interactive, so that people could actually, tradespeople would be able to mix and match a bit more. As it is, retrofit works is still the best game in town for large scale retrofit, but I think we can develop on that. Jenny had a question. I saw her hand go up briefly, but she's gone now.
Oh, yeah, she seems to have disappeared. I saw her hand went up. Yeah.
I've got a question.
Okay. Come in.
Sorry, it's Mark Allen.
Mark.
Yeah. Is your procedural thing? Is your presentation going to be shared?
I can share it. That shouldn't be a problem. I shall PDF it now and put a link up in the chat.
Fantastic, because there was so much material in there. I feel like I could probably watch the video again and really take it in. I think it'd be great to have an opportunity for a bigger discussion, you know, that like 2 hours on this rather than half an hour in this. And if other co-ops are interested, then maybe we could organise that with you, Charlie.
Yes, I'm happy to help with anything that actually delivers results.
We will be putting this on YouTube as on our channel.
Oh,
so
lordy.
you can see it again.
Yeah, well, I need to test. I haven't got round to testing out that beta thing that Zoom have got, where you can see my happy little face in the bottom of the picture.
Oh.
One day.
Colin, you have your hand up. Do you want to come in again?
Yes, briefly. Thanks very much for that opportunity. Again, referring back to working life, we on one undertaking, I worked on the PPC 2000 partnering contract. I wonder if that's obviously looking at larger scale procurement. Is that something that we could explore here? That's the partner, the construction industry, the professionals and the client working together. Particularly works well where there's unexplored issues on the site, which you've identified. So that can help balance out risk and cost.
If I was going to put an action list together for you lot down there, I would get on the phone to Retrofit Works on Monday to discuss something like that, because I think you're right, some partnering arrangement it would be really handy. The problem you've got is that partnering tends to happen with large contractors that are price gouging on a regular basis, and it becomes very difficult to make the numbers work. So when I was technical support for the Greater Manchester Combined Authorities Green Deal Communities Programme back in 2015. I knew the two insulation installers that all three of the Green Deal framework contractors were using. So you've got these contractors being the front end to the CA, but actually they're still using the same people. And then one of those went bust. The other guy I still do occasional bits of work with, but he's now retrofitting Arthur Glossop. But it's better to cut out, though, those frankly parasitic arrangements in the middle. They're supporting enormous wage packets. I'm not absolutely convinced that the efficiencies that they bring to bear are real. And in fact, the head of retrofit for what used to be Keepmoat became NG and has now been kicked back out as Equans. He told me in a meeting that that actually they weren't interested in private housing, they were only interested in social housing, but that it was more expensive the more they did, which completely flies against all of the received wisdoms. So what we're seeing there is contractors trying to line their own pockets or proper, like basically doing a Carillion, because they take on so many dodgy projects that make them less money. Those other projects then get used to prop them up, and I think you want to have no part of that. And certainly Russell Smith at Retrofit Works has been trying to find ways around that. They're another cooperative, so I think they're worth seeing if they can bring it on. I think he's already got quite a bit of work. That's a link to the presentation. But I think so there are partnering versions, but the guy from Keepmoat that retired when they finished the Green Deal said, what we really ought to be doing is empowering white van man, which I think was a key point, that it's actually the smaller scale trades that are going to, especially if you're working in people's homes, you've got to have a much more responsive service than is available from the kind of partnering contractors that are available out there.
Good points there, Charlie. Is there anything else for Charlie? Because I think we need to move on. We've actually, it's 25 past 12, and I think we've two other items of business to do, and then we're finished. But that was an excellent presentation. Sorry about getting the SAP and EPCs wrong, and glad to be corrected.
It's always a font of information for you, Mick, any time.
Oh, fair enough. Would you be willing to do a 2-hour session on this, as Mark suggested, in some future date?
Yeah, but I think maybe just do a bit of, maybe take some of the information in that West Yorkshire report that's the link to it is on the slides, and just have a look at some of those numbers and maybe see what you can cobble together in terms of willingness to spend from the various housing co-ops. Because I think what would make it a really useful session would be, let's make a plan. So start to assemble bill data that your members are currently paying, so you can build up that first bit of a revenue stack, find out how many of your members are actually comfortable at the temperatures they're getting with that spend, and how many of them are actually able to afford that amount they're spending. Because then that then gives you a starting point to start to create a retrofit proposition that is not going to hurt your members, because obviously that's the critical outcome you want. And in the meantime, I should have got somewhere with Flexitricity in terms of working out this aggregation model. And I think obviously the London Fed is in an ideal position to put together a group buying scheme across. How many properties have you got in cooperative ownership in London these days?
A few thousand.
Yeah, so you've easily got the wherewithal to be able to create a model that a virtual power plant operator could get into. And actually, if we could put the proposition together, you might be able to punt it around the market and get some better deals, because Alistair Martin's 35% is only going to be challenged if I can get some competition in on him.
Well, the other thing, people, a lot of co-ops now have something in the region of $1 million+ cash reserves sitting there.
Yeah, but I know how much you guys don't want to spend on
Spend
that.
it, I know.
I've been around that mulberry bush before. I mean, I
Or, yeah.
remember us trying to get the mutual loan guarantee scheme off the ground, and the reticence at CCH conferences for anyone to go anywhere near supporting other co-ops, despite the fact they would love to, but they couldn't, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there are some regulatory boundaries to that, but I think actually, I think we've got to the point now where the climate emergency is so clear and pressing that what's the point of reserves if we've not got a habitable planet to spend them on? And the thing that I hope I've shown you in the pictures is you can make your properties really quite funky if you're canny about how you spend the money. And so you can you can use it as regeneration as well as improving the comfort of your people. And obviously all the health outcomes as well.
What do you think of the idea of every co-op should be looking at having a stock condition survey of their properties that incorporates retrofit potential?
Well, the retrofit potential is surprisingly easy, to be honest, because you've presumably got EPCs on all of them anyway. Certainly Parity have got data on EPCs that are nearby, because they've got a thing, the data quality is not brilliant, but they've done a thing where they've cloned EPC data from nearby properties. So if you've got, but I would certainly advise you all to get EPCs done to your homes. I think that's, and you can probably, you know, we got an EPC, because we had to get an EPC done at this place to put our ground source heat pump in. It only cost us 35 quid. I mean, it's, in many ways, it's really shit data, but it's a good start. It gives you a data set to start to work with. I've called it the triage assessment, that it at least gives you a snapshot of how good things are, and you can start to improve the granularity of the data if someone then decides to pull their stock forward and build a proper retrofit plan for it. But I predict quite a lot of movement on that. But I think the other thing, if any of you have got any links into tradespeople and into retired tradespeople as well as currently working tradespeople, and maybe into some colleges wondering about dipping into this, I think it's about time the London Fed had its own basically contracting capacity. I think that would be the thing that would, back to Colin's point about how you start to deal with the ebbs and flows of things you weren't expecting to find on site. Actually, if it's your own organisation, you could really, you would be in a much, and I think Retrofit Works might be the route to do that, so that you create, because you can join, LFHC could join Retrofit Works, they're a multi-stakeholder cooperative, so you can join them on the one hand as a client body, which then gives you some control over how procurement happens from there, and effectively create a kind of virtual contracting capacity through that.
That's an idea we'll explore. We've been looking at that pre-2019 to set up some form of company to handle our maintenance, since we're well aware of the fact that it's getting harder and harder to get maintenance people down here.
Yep.
And maybe we need to think about growing our own.
Well, 27.5 quid an hour, someone's just been, I've just, the Beaver Box that I'm working with, they just lost a new recruit to another housing provider because they were offering him 27.5 quid an hour. And that's not even London waiting. Now, I don't know about you, but 40 grand a year, I'd have that.
Oh, yeah. I think the potential there is immense. I mean, well, I'll talk to you about, with a different hat on, I'll talk to you about coming down and giving a speech to somebody else as well. As, I know where there's some training facilities that can be upgraded to.
Well, but I think the best training facilities are in the buildings themselves. I think actually, as long as you've got somebody that knows which end of a drill is the pointy end and knows what that little bubble in the middle of a spirit level does, and has basic numeracy so they can read and add up from a tape measure, which is no laughing matter because I've had to let 2 people go because they were too far off basic numeracy for me to be able to work with them. And I didn't have the, I said, go to college, go and fill that gap. But as long as you've got those, and then, you know, they can use a client's toilet without weeing all over the wall kind of thing, then you're most of the way there. And then it's just, it's an aptitude thing. It's an ability to think on your feet, an ability to problem solve. And I accept that's not for everyone, but I think there is a model, if we can get the scale up, where you can have a bunch of retrofitters that are the problem solvers and a bunch of people that just want to learn how to do it by rote and just do it repeatedly, because some of the work is really boring. Once I've worked out a removal window reveal to allow the UPVC windows to be swapped out later, and I've worked out a fixing system. My brains are trickling out my ears by the third reveal, but actually the guy I'm working with, he's much happier just doing the same thing over and over again. He finds it a lot less stressful. So you can mix and match between the two of them, and I think it feels to me like there are so many people in rubbish jobs that we must be able to offer them a future.
I think so as well. I've been working on that in Islington. I'll get back to you about that. Anyway, thanks, Charlie, because I think we need to move on. And
nice to see you all again.
Yeah, likewise. We look forward to seeing you in the future. And have a good Christmas, you and Sarah and family.
Will do. Cheers, and you all.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Bye. Greg, do you want to come in on the last item, Rising Sun Collective?
Yes, we've got Chloe here from Rising Sun.
Hi.
London Fed's already bought some loan stock, but they're requesting a little more, and I think Chloe's going to explain why and just give us a little bit of an update.
Yes. Could I share my screen? Am I allowed as well? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, so this is our loan stock offer. Basically, we have now at this stage acquired the money for the property, which is great, but we've just got 35k left to raise, which we're framing as like green improvements and a 9th bedroom, which basically like it fulfills the financial plan. So we have to have this 9th room in order for the financial plan to work. So even though we've got the money for the house, you know, we still really need this last bit. So we are a collective just between Peckham and New Cross, and the Rising Sun has been at the centre of this collective of low-income creatives for the past like 6 years. And it's got a recording studio which was built by us who live there, a performance space where regularly events can happen and young artists and again low-income creatives can perform or make work without the stress of not being able to afford to do so, because we've just got the space to facilitate that. And we've got an extensive list here of people that have passed through the doors, people that count themselves as part of the collective, and it's got like wide reaching, you know, even global sort of reach in terms of the artists that comprise the collective. So yeah, this is like some of our outputs. We've done EP launches in the past, obviously, as I said, recording studio, there's been exhibitions. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like Boiler Room. They've done live streams with us. People have made films, and quite big music videos have been made there too. We've been on a massive press drive as part of trying to gather the loan stock, and as I say, it's been largely successful because we've raised over £1 million in the past like 7 months, but we just need this tiny last bit of loan stock to fully complete on that. So this is the rent, how we're going to sort of keep it affordable. I mean, I know it says £650 there. You might think, how is that affordable? But what we're saying is this is a live workspace. So, you know, otherwise you'd be affording a studio as well as your living and rent costs. So therefore £650 for London, for this area as well, just as you can see down here with the bar charts. That keeps these people alive and able to stay in the area, because otherwise it's just being priced out. The landlord put it up to sell last winter, and yeah, it was just an absolutely devastating blow, because otherwise we'd have just carried on happily renting it. But we've just stepped into action to try to save the space, because it's, you know, it's just destined to become more luxury flats and unaffordable housing in an area where that's sort of quickly increasing. We've had lots of, you know, studies done on the building to try and work out the green improvements for us. And we've had our like EPC rating raised from an abysmal F to a D, but it's beyond our control in that sense, because the landlord's upkeep is just so poor. For example, some of the windows have acetate instead of glass in them. So instantly we're just going to be sorting that out with this last 35k, putting glass in, putting proper insulation in the roof, and yeah, as you can see, solar panels as well as a plan, which would be great. And our lender for the mortgage ecology, part of the terms of lending is that we follow through on these green commitments too. Should I continue? How far should I go, Greg? Like, how much time do we have?
Well, you've got the pack. The pack is available. We'll put a link to it on the website.
Yeah.
If you should, I think a key thing for people is that you did a lot of work with Catalyst on the business plan to ensure that there was some sort of accreditation to it that people could rely on. So.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll go into that now. Hang on, let me just flip down to that point. What did I talk about? Catalyst. Here we go. So yeah, we've worked with community-led housing, were the guys that actually got us sort of set up and helped with the being incorporated, and pointed us in the direction of Catalyst Collective, who created the financial plan for us. Let me just go down to it, which is a 65-year forecast, including contingency and repairs. And yeah, I mean, Gautier did such a wonderful job here of creating a sustainable future for us. Yeah, I mean, how far do you want me to go on that?
I think, given that we've been in the meeting for quite a long time, if you can take some questions.
Oh yeah, okay then, please.
Has anybody got any questions? Then for Chloe. Just one, Chloe. How much do you need? Could you reiterate how much you need?
Just 35,000 now. So we're taking 1,000 and upwards as loan stock for either 5, 10, 20 or 30 years, with up to 3% return. And obviously it's not just a monetary investment, it's a cultural investment. So yes.
So sorry, I'm
Niall, you want to come in? Sorry,
it's just a question. Might be a silly question, but it's a living space and recording studios and so on. I mean, does that mean? I mean, how does that work from the point of view of noise?
It's underground.
Beside those spaces.
Yeah, it's really conveniently underground because it's an ex-pub, so they've got this massive basement, so the sound insulation is perfect, and it's also, in its own ground. Really, we've got a house to the left, but they never hear anything, so that's cool.
Yeah, so it's not costing you extra for, materials to deaden the noise or anything like that?
No, that's actually fine. I mean, further sound insulation is always beneficial really for recording studios, but we'll get round to that when the building's actually in our hands properly and we've gone through the exchange process and everything.
Okay.
What's the timescale during which you need pledges?
ASAP really, because we're just in the process of negotiating completion date now, so yes, just imminently. Yeah, I guess, yeah, I can't even give you a date really, because we were thinking of like February completion, but it's still just being negotiated by the landlord, who's, he's still quite tricky about being pinned down, but yeah.
Bearing in mind that cohorts may not have another meeting till January, that's what I'm thinking there.
Yeah, I see. Well, yeah, I mean, this was just a best shot if anybody is interested, really, because we're so desperately close. We just really love to push it over the line.
But if for instance, you know, my co-op made a pledge at a meeting in mid-January.
Mm-hmm.
Would that potentially work for you, or is that too late? And
yeah, please. And we can always let you know if in fact we've managed to raise all the money by then. But it would be really handy if you were considering that, please. Thank you.
Thanks.
Niall, do you want to come in again?
No, sorry, Mick, I forgot to put my hand down again.
Well, I sort of thinking maybe we can London Fed if we can. I presume we can stretch to £1 or £2 if necessary to support you. Would people be happy for this?
Thank you.
Yeah. So we can.
Thank you. That's really kind.
Yeah. I'll have a chat on the exact amount of money with the secretary and the treasurer.
Yes.
We can get it in anyway before Christmas, so that should help. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much. That's really.
Was Trevor trying to jump in?
Trevor, sorry.
My question was answered. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really exciting.
Yeah. We're coming to the last item now. Sorry, I'll just move on quick because we have overrun by 15 minutes, which is good for the co-op meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
and our last item is an award. It's the London Federation of Housing Co-ops Distinguished Service Award. And this year we're going to award it to Ted Houston. Ted has spent the last 20 years at Park Hill Housing Co-op, Clapham, where when he immediately became chair. Before Park Hill, Ted was active in Islington Community Housing Co-op and then Clapham North Housing Co-op. Ted over the years has been on MC constantly with a few exceptions, and has held positions of secretary treasurer of the co-op over that time. Ted is known fondly throughout the co-op for organising communal garden parties to allow members of the co-op to socialise and meet each other. And he's been nominated by a number of people. So all I can say is, does the meeting want to award him this honour, if I can put it that way?
Yeah,
Marcus agreed. Yeah, that's grand. So I'm sorry it was so short and so quick, as it was a bit of an issue. In that case, we're coming to finish the meeting. It's been a brilliant meeting. Quite enjoyed Charlie's stuff, even if he did haul me up over and make corrections. Well, it will be good to pursue that. I think a number of initiatives there that we can go away, exec can go away and get together. And it's great that we have this positive stuff, and this fight against climate change, I think, can really regenerate the co-op sector if we can get this right. Just one more announcement, and that is that on the issue of climate change, Future Build is on in February. I don't know whether we'll meet, whether we'll have a forum before February or not. It's well worth checking it out and going down there. You can be inspired by some of the stuff they do there. And again, we'll put the link into Future Build into the website and the Facebook page. Well, with that said, everybody, can I wish everybody, Trevor, you want to come in?
I think there's three of us, isn't there? Kate, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to let everyone know that John is retiring at the end of December.
Right.
And Unit 11 are currently on the lookout for probably a transitional replacement. We're approaching co-op homes. Is that right, John, at the minute? But if anyone would be interested in housing management or any part of housing management for a very small co-op, maybe on a short-term basis, then please do get in touch. It's Unit 11 unit11coop@gmail.com. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Kate. And who else had their hand up? Trevor, you wanted to come in?
So I'm new here, and I just wanted to say I want to know how I continue the conversation with other people from other co-ops about energy efficiency and everything we've talked about today. You know, is there
I just wondered whether there would be scope for a WhatsApp group or a Signal group.
Maybe like we should set up like a quarterly meeting already. I don't know.
Well, we'll have another meeting about this. Hopefully we can have one early in the spring, I think. Probably February, coincide with future build. It seems to be an issue, and we can also start reaching out to other co-ops as well who weren't here. I think it's an issue that concerns everybody.
I've been contacting a few other co-ops already, so yeah, all that.
Yeah. Do you have an email address or contact details as well, Trevor?
Yeah, sure, I'll email you after this.
Conversation with you about this and other stuff.
Cool. Cheers, mate.
Yeah. Right. Is anybody else? Oh, Glenn, you want to come in?
Yeah. I'd like us to look at the local energy bill, which is going through the Houses of Parliament at the moment. It's very relevant to our society and our members. Out of the scope of this meeting, but I would like to have a chat with you sometime in the near future about it. I can ring with anywhere or whatever, email you. I think it's something we ought to be looking at.
I think so. Yeah, do that because I was following that as well, quite interested in that. I didn't mention it today because I didn't know how far they got with the local energy bill.
Well,
it's
something the government is very supportive, but they're not prepared to do anything about it.
No, they won't.
Very typical, I have to say, of this present administration, but pressure has to be kept up on this, and it does affect the growth of energy co-ops in residential properties.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Residential community properties.
That's true.
That's all.
We will, yeah. Send me an email or ring me about that, and we'll have a conversation about it. Yeah.
I will do. Okay, thanks.
Right. Is anybody else wanting to make comments, questions, AOB, anything? I can't see anybody's hand going up. In which case, I wish everybody the compliments of the season and see you again, hopefully early next year in the spring. Cheers, everybody.
Nice to meet you all.
See you, Mick. See you, everybody.
Cheers, Travis. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop it recording now.